Introducing health and wellness advocate, veteran international real estate investment expert, author and speaker, Adiel Gorel.
Health tips, fitness tips, nutrition and well-being, world-class experts, all right here on my podcast, The Adiel Gorel Show.
Well, Adiel, that was fascinating, just listening to James in that first part of the interview, not only, talk about his background and the extensive, research and study and work that he's done in this field now for many years. But the thing that really stuck out for me was this whole conversation that you and him were having about fear, and this notion that he has that we can deprogram ourselves of fear, that we can somehow, through different activities and practices and things like this, we can slowly over time, eliminate fear from our life. On top of that, just the very fact that we all suffer from fear is almost like a constant human state that we all suffer from, but that he's offering hope, that maybe we don't have to live in such a fearful way.
Well, he said hope was comprised of both the idea that the world can get better, but just as crucially, he said that you are a part of what's going to make it get better for you. In other words, you have some control. Because if you just think the world's going to get better, that's more, he said, like wishful thinking. But hope is a combination of that plus your part in it. You know, that's hope. You know that you can make it better. I thought it was interesting that he said that our brains are actually hardwired to do certain things that are, for example, freeze. When you're in fear, the brain, and he called it, the operating system 1.0. He wants to help us make it better, like 2.0. He said 1.0, the way we are programmed is we freeze. First we freeze. First and foremost, we freeze. Then we run if we can. And only then, if we have to, we battle. So fight or flight, So first we freeze, I was thinking when he said it, deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
He said the first is to freeze and then flight and then fight if there's no choice. So, I even asked him, I said, maybe the way nature, imbued us with this hardwire freeze is not a bad thing because it gives us a chance to assess the situation and work from it. So it's really, I said, what about the length of time? Because he was using freeze as a bigger fear. Like, let's say somebody wants to write a book, but they're afraid that they're going to be ridiculed, that they're not good enough, it's going to be too hard. So that kind of fear causes them to freeze over years and over months and years. So I think that's a little different. But one thing he did say is that in this modern world, the risks daily are usually much less than they used to be in the old primitive existence, except for certain parts of the world with war. So, we're not at risk all the time. So the mechanisms of freezing in the face of fear may not be as useful, he said.
I was on a webinar last week with Jack Cornfield and Tristan Harris. Jack, he teaches at Spirit Rock, just in Marin there. And Tristan Harris, who I believe he was formerly with Google, he was the ethics director, I believe, for the corporation. And he's come out over the last few years talking about some of the dangers, with social media and how a lot of social media plays to our fear. The content that's on it, whether someone will like your picture or not like your picture, will they comment, will they not comment, do you have followers? It plays to these more primitive, like James was talking about this 1.0 operating system. And Tristan made a really interesting comment, which kind of you made me think about. He said, and I don't even think it was his observation, but I can't remember who the original thinker was, but he said, we are, as human beings, we have a primordial operating system, and we have organized ourselves in a medieval structure in terms of how we relate to each other. And then we've dumped in quantum technology that so far supersedes our ability to handle it. Like, the technology is more advanced than our operating system is. We're still operating like hunters and gatherers, afraid that death is around the corner. And we live in a super ultra modern world where the technology has made that not the case.
So true.
And it's very interesting.
And actually, you see that in the modern society, like right now, people get in trouble every day. And in some ways, if you go deep and think beyond your initial craziness and outrage, they're following some of their programming that worked very well 1,000 years ago, worked very poorly now. But when they follow the go-to mode, they get in terrible trouble, they get sued. It's quite an interesting shift now when we're moving between a highly evolved, supposedly intellectual society and the very primitive, animals that we are. We are animals. We are sitting here and talking about an interview with James Garrett on the brain, but all of a sudden you need to pee. You gotta go, man.
Yeah. As they say, nature calls.
Nature calls. We are this weird combination of this beast or animal, if you will, which completely permeates us, everything. And yet there's another layer. So that's what makes the James Garrett interview even more fascinating, because he's talking about that part of us that also contains the extra stuff. I asked him in this part about negativity. I said, why is it that I have 100 experiences in this example that I'm now making up, and 99 of them are great and one of them sucks? Why do I hark back to the one that sucks? So remember when I asked the urban monk this question, he told me the story of the garden full of beautiful roses, and then the dog took a poop in the back of the garden, and when the fly comes to the garden, that's all the fly can see is the poop. But when the bumblebee comes, when the bee comes, she can see all the flowers and say, do you want to think like a fly or like a bee? It's a cute story. But I asked him that, and he actually said that we are programmed, we are hardwired to think about the negative. And he gave the reasons for it. I don't remember the details, but that was fascinating.
Yeah. And I think, the negativity bias. And then that leads into the compounding problem of, we have these fears and we focus on what's not working, even though much of our life could be working. And because we focus on what's not working, fear then becomes compounded with anxiety. And this cycle begins where first it was a fear about one thing, and then it's anxiety, and then you start having more fear about more things, and the anxiety kicks in, and you just end up in this very strange loop, which I think if you observe our society, it's clear we're struggling with this. You have to look at the opioid addiction, depression, all of these things going on. And I wonder in some respects, if we see all of our technological advancements, whether it's in medicine or computer sciences, robotics, artificial intelligence, these sorts of things, if we see a vision of ourselves, of possibility, and it feels like we can just reach out and touch it, but yet our primitive nature is still so limited in so many ways. And so it creates this abyss or this chasm that we have difficulty, coexisting almost in two separate states. One state where we're very primitive, nature calls, and then the other state, which is, yeah, but I can envision and see what's possible. And then does anxiety not result from that, right? Because we're living in two states.
Yeah, and Gurdjieff, who was the teacher of, of Uspensky, there was a period I was very fascinated by that knowledge, by these people. Gurdjieff used to say very simply, okay, the reason we go to public places, the reason we go to the theater, to the movies, is sex. We go because of sex. We go because there's going to be a lot of women or a lot of men, or now it's men and women, whatever it is. He was very blunt about it. But that, again, the primitive, in why does somebody want to become a billionaire? If we go back into what does it give them? Again, it can be translated into power. Money means what? What? You're going to eat more food in a day? No, you can only eat so much food. So somehow it comes to sex. A lot of people say that's at the basis of everything. Even if you see the primitive herds, of animals, the males fight for the right to breed. So, I mean, are we so removed from that? It's so, and what about males, females? It's fascinating. But one thing I liked about what he said was he grew up with a bias that he was going to get in trouble, he said. He was actually a really good boy, but he always felt he was going to get in trouble. And he started, he talked about something that I thought was fascinating. When I go to the gym and I start doing the military press, I can start with a certain weight, X, and that's all I can do for a couple of reps. But I do it for another week. Now I can put more weight on, and eventually I can lift much more weight because I'm stronger. He said, that's how we strengthen those muscles in our brain, in our mind. He was always looking to see how he was going to get in trouble. So he strengthened this muscle so much, this virtual muscle, that when people started to talk to him, he was already interpreting it using his strongest muscle. Oh, how is this going to get me in trouble? He was biased toward, and we all have our own bias. The bias might be, I'm going to be left alone. They're going to shun me. I'm going to be alone. The group is going to kick me out. I mean, that's the bias. Or the bias is, I'm only accepted if I'm healthy and strong. If I'm sick, nobody wants me. I mean, those biases dominate. And because we hark on them, we actually strengthen those muscles. So he was talking about the possibility of making these muscles in our brain less strong and developing some other ones. And that is really quite fascinating. I hope that's what he talks about in the second, in the second interview, in the second part.
Yeah. Well, and it should be empowering for people at the very notion that they have the ability, again, in a world where, we've talked about this many times, we have sickness industry, not healthcare, or, it's more of a sickness industry, and everyone wants to take a pill, and all the money exists around these easy, just take a pill. But what he's talking about are there are things we can do for free. We don't have to get a doctor's prescription. We don't have to pay money for it. There are things we can do to exercise those parts of our brain that are serving us and are of use to us, and also diminishing those parts of our brain that, like the fear thing he's talking about, that don't serve us. So that should be very empowering for people. Now, the key question here is, okay, we learn how to do something, but then there's this like inherent laziness I feel in, if you look at the trajectory of all of nature, it's to not use much energy as much as possible, to become efficient as much as possible, right? And so the nature of human beings as also natural things would be to try to preserve energy and to not take an action. So the question is going to be, okay, you learn how you can reprogram your thinking, but will you do it? So
Yeah,
I'm
well,
really excited to hear from James if he gives us some of those tips.
we'll talk to him about that. We'll talk to him about that. But
Yeah.
he did call it, you know, the negativity bias and
Yeah.
the collective discontent. So there's a
Yeah.
general that life is hard. You know, I mean, there is this a colloquial saying, life is hard, life sucks, and then you die. Or life is hard,
Yeah.
and then you die. That's not a
Yeah.
great way of looking at it, right? So, I mean,
No.
he said negativity is like Velcro and positivity is like Teflon, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it was interesting.
You know, I was laughing so hard because it's a beautiful day, and that's when I think of cancer. It was just such a a good joke, but
Woody Allen.
really illustrated the point. Yeah, but really, really illustrated the point. You know, of our neurosis. I don't think it's that far from the truth.
Well, you know, that's the thing. That's why it kind of makes us laugh, because it might be an exaggerating view. But, you know, he said so many things. I mean, starting from a couple of things that I really liked. He said, neurons are the tech that translates experience into biology. I like that. I thought that was very lovely. And then I liked it when he said, personality is not who you are, it's what you do. But I mean, we talked about the habits. We talked about him being a child and always feeling like he was going to get in trouble. We talked about, we all have our biases. So he says the way to start to cut through it is to, and what we talked about, why do I look only at the negative? Because he said we have the negativity bias. So the way to cut through it, he says, is there's some tools. And here is where we start getting some tools from him. One of them is savoring. Savoring. So when you have a good experience, I don't care what, you woke up in the morning, you had a good night's sleep, savor it for at least 10 seconds.
Yeah.
He talked about his little kids. He's surrounded by 2 kids, very young. Of course, he has many little beautiful moments to savor, but savor that was there. So, I mean, again, we talked about that is related to gratitude, right? Gratitude. So now he gave a very concrete thing to do. I know it sounds almost a little cheesy, but he said you can rewire happiness in these micro moments. Your child just stood up for the first time. Savor it. And right in these 10 seconds, you're starting to rewire the happiness, the state of your brain. So he said, after you brush your teeth, which of course is just something that you do all the time, write 3 things that you're grateful about.
Yeah.
Make that a habit. So, you know, write 3 things. Again, gratitude. It's not an accident that so many people talk about gratitude as meaning so much, because it takes you out of the negativity bias.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, I'm starting to see some patterns here in all of the interviews that we've been doing. And one theme that's emerging, whether we're talking about slowing down when we chew our food, whether we're talking about, you know, taking the time, you know, to meditate and to clear your thoughts, or, you know, you were talking, you know, when you talked with Jean Beaulieu with the tuning forks and taking the time to, so, and then here's James taking gratitude, taking the time, pause. It seems like there's this theme that is rippling through a lot of these experts that we're speaking to, which is that we need to slow down in life generally, that we're not taking enough time to be in gratitude, to savor, to contemplate, to reflect, to recharge ourselves. You know, we are creatures of our environment, like all living things are, and the environment in which we exist is very high paced, high stressed, focused on productivity at all costs, even the cost of our own health, our own happiness, our own peace of mind in this case, right? And so I often say you get the life you tolerate, and I feel like we are tolerating so many things, even though it is making us unhealthy and unhappy.
I agree. And actually, now that you're talking, I connected to something else that you and I discussed in one of the interviews, or maybe just on the podcast, I think we did, about eating fast. So we both said that we eat very fast. I inhale my food. Everybody says you should chew your food so many times. You should really, first of all, you masticate it. You get the enzyme working. Your saliva is working. You get more out of your food. But now, in the context of what we're talking here, let's assume your food is tasty to you. You like your food. Mm-hmm. Well, every bite you have an opportunity to savor.
Yeah.
Great. So, that was so good. A few seconds. Mm-hmm. Micro moments of rewiring the negativity bias.
Yeah. Yeah. You could rewire the negativity bias 200 times per meal.
Right.
Right.
But instead, at least for me, and you said for you too, that does not happen. Maybe I'm reading something and boom, it's over there. Yeah, it kind of tasted good for a second.
Yeah. There was a few moments, a few flashes of ingredient bliss, but for the most part, I was focused on what I had to do after this. And I think that speaks to the anxiety and everything that we're struggling with as a society right now, because we're just so busy. We never take the time to have the gratitude for how good this food tastes, have the gratitude for whatever, like, what James is talking about.
And sometimes we just focus only on the food tasting good. It reminds me of a quote from a singer, Reba McEntire. I watched her once. Okay. She said, "Nothing tastes as good as being thin." So anyway.
So we can savor the non-eating.
Right. We can say, I'm thin. I'm savoring that I'm thin, which I'm not. So, he talked about many things, but one of them, he talked about, again, going back to how he was a child. And in many cases, the child is angry or has a tantrum or has crying. And many parents are busy there stop crying. No reason to feel upset. So he showed us that if you actually talk to the child, a little bit like a psychologist, just to say, I understand you're angry. What are you feeling? The child starts hearing these big people in their lives, these, adults, the all-knowing, all-powerful gods. They take the child seriously. They listen to her. What is she feeling? They're there with her. He said a child like this is going to grow up feeling more confident in every environment. And he says this really goes everywhere. He said he brought the example of you sit in a meeting with a board of directors and you have a good idea to say, but if your bias, the go-to is, I'm going to be ridiculed, you may not say what you need to say. I mean, that could be very serious. Yeah. So then we talked about how I mentioned that in the financial world that I'm in, I always think it would be good if in high school they gave a short course on managing your life financially for the young people. And it occurred to me, many parents are young. Maybe it'll be good today. One day you're going to be a parent. Here are some things you can do for your child when you're a parent. Maybe that'll save a lot of grief to a lot of people. So we talked about that. But then he didn't mention a book. I don't remember who the writer is, but it's How to Talk So Kids Listen and Listen So Kids Talk.
Right.
I like that name.
Yeah. It's something that I'm thinking about after the interview is how, okay, we have this operating system 1.0. And it would seem to me that what we've really done well, kind of to that quote that I mentioned about Tristan Harris before, how we are primordial beings living in a 15th century political and cultural structure, and then we have all this technology. Something that I was thinking about, though, after this interview is that, we're operating with our 1.0 operating system, and what we've been really good at doing, and again, this might be an energy saving thing, how we talked about the least resistance on the interview you were talking with James about, the brain has a lot of energy, but is selfish and doesn't want to have to use the energy. And so there's a compensation system kind of at work here. And I'm wondering if all of our technology and the way we've organized our society is to compensate for the fact that most people, unless they do the work he's talking about reprogramming your own mind, are really just operating from that 1.0 operating system. I mean, we say we're adults, but our operating system has not evolved any further than when we were 5-year-olds. We're still, reacting to the same cues, the emotional cues of being liked, the emotional cues of, being accepted and applauded, and avoiding confrontation and avoiding the friction and whatever else, right? My point simply is that we feel like we're so sophisticated and we surround ourselves with all of this stuff and we have all this money. And could this just be one massive overcompensation for the fact that our operating system hasn't evolved at all?
I do think, as we said it, before, we operate to a large extent like the dogs do, hardwired, and then we have a layer that's like a child, and I want mine, and then we have the more sophisticated layer that we play around with and wear all the time, which sometimes falls by the wayside when things get hard, and you see when wars begin. But I liked it when he gave us specific stuff to do. He talked about, we already said, write 3 things that you're grateful for after you brush your teeth. And then he said, if-then plans. So he said,
I love that.
Let's say I want to be a better listener. So I can say, if-then. Let's say I'm in a conversation. Before I speak, I can ask a question. That's training to be a better listener. Or before I speak, I count to 10. By the way, counting to 10 is not so bad because the other person might say something and might have something to say. Or he said, or after I brush my teeth, I'll do this. Then I asked him about laziness. I called it laziness. Laziness. So let's say, okay, you have this yoga practice, you stretch, it makes you feel good, but you're too lazy to do it. You'd rather watch TV. So he was very charitable. Instead of calling it lazy, he called it energy efficient. He said our brain is an energy Scrooge. So actually, this is really great because if somebody says, oh, you're so lazy, I said, no, I'm energy efficient. Come on.
I was just thinking, so the next time I find someone laying on the couch eating Doritos, watching Netflix, and they do that 10 hours a day, they can say, I'm just being energy efficient.
Actually, they can take it even further. They say, the whole world is trying to become more energy efficient. I'm contributing. Doritos. I'm
this is my environmental impact here. I'm in net zero.
I'm environmentalist. I'm an environmentalist right here. So he talked about to combat the laziness. He talked about a forced detour. So he was likening the go-to experience like the highway. We are on the highway, and it's time to do yoga. There's an exit, but we're not going to do it because we are lazy. Maybe we'll watch Netflix. That's an easy thing to do on the highway. He said, how do you take the forced detour off the highway? And he says, well, like a workout buddy. Let's say you want to do your yoga, you do it even on Zoom nowadays with your friend. Let's say I do it with you. It's 7 p.m. every day. Now, the social fears, I don't want to disappoint you. You're going to be there at 7. I'm much more likely to do my yoga when I have a workout buddy or run or walk, right? And you said something beautiful, actually. You said, I would like you to say it, again, how we pit apart. I'd like you to say that.
Basically, I was just observing how we take one aspect of our nature that is, say, more difficult to change, and we pit it against another aspect of our nature. So in this case, the yoga example, pitting my need to be seen and acknowledged and part of the group is a bigger evolutionary pull than my need to conserve energy watching Netflix on the couch, because I need to always be part of the group and not be ostracized. So that evolutionary aspect of my way of being counters my laziness if I set it up properly. And that's what James was trying to say.
You pit them against each other. I loved it when you said that. I really did. So, and then we wanted to bring it down to people benefiting from it. And I noticed on his website that he has a 6-week course. It's an intensive happiness, habit, and productivity that you yourself learn to do by design. And I think he even gave us, for all our viewers, a coupon, the word fearless, just the word fearless. And you know what, to tell you the truth, I'm kind of tempted to take this course.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that this conversation, this interview with James, and there are others that are starting to percolate, over the last 5 years or so. This whole idea of designing your cognitive life, being able to rewire your brain, neuroplasticity, he talked a lot about that. We're just at the beginning of understanding this. If you can imagine 50 years from now, learning things that, say, he might teach in his course and others with similar courses, we might have a totally different way of approaching life as enough people take on this idea that they can actually reprogram their brain.
Well,
we might have a different world.
Chad, there are modalities even in the healing world that many people, especially doctors, would be very skeptical of. One of them is, for example, all the Chinese medicine, acupuncture. So lots of people now recognize that it has a benefit. But some people still say, no, I'm sorry, this is stupid. And certainly something like, the homeopathy field, we say, come on, there's not even one atom. This is just so silly. So, again, this is based on science in the year 2020. But what about science in the year 2720? Now you can measure vibrations. You understand that when the water takes the shape of the atom, even if the atom is not there, the water retains. Now you can measure it. Now it doesn't sound like So, so many things that are, unraveling. For example, nitric oxide. Chad, it's been the center of some of the interviews now for a couple of months. Nitric oxide was only discovered in the 90s. 25 years ago.
Late 90s.
And they gave them the Nobel Prize. If you talk to somebody 40 years ago about some magic gas that you can generate just by breathing through your nose and humming and putting, are you insane? But
exactly. No, great point. And I think that's where James and people like him might be onto something with these practices to help us all take it seriously. We are not victims. We have the ability to rewire our brain and rewire our life as a result of it. Well, Adiel, and for all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us today on the Adiel Gorel Show. And we look forward to you joining us with our next interview next week. Until then, why don't you take on a few design your brain practices and see how that works out, and share it with your friends, and maybe go check out James's site. Any final parting words, Adiel?
No, it was really a joy. And Chad, I do have to say that it's a very great joy to have you be a part of it, because our talks, our chats before and after, our podcast are nothing but sheer delight. We stimulate, each other's brains, and some nice stuff, at least, for me, it's very
likewise. Nice. And I feel the same. And I'm just so grateful for it that now I must think about cancer. So
I don't want to end on this note. I don't want to end on this note. So you guys have a great time. Go and listen to this interview. There were many more things that he said. There are books that we should probably read, but I think this is a useful thing. Once again, making little shifts to the mind, that could be good. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for joining me today. Click the subscribe button for more video. Got a question or comment? I love questions and comments. Leave yours below. And here's another video you've got to see.